And again, this was born out of me looking at how I really did kind of approach this prior to writing offers already, especially the successful ones. And from there, I looked at it and it was like, okay, what do I do next? And it was because then you're like, well, maybe I should just start writing. But then I thought about, I'm like, there's always these certain questions that I need to answer. And if I don't answer them, I always get stuck in my copy, like every time. So some of them kind of already get answered during research in the mechanism, like who's the market, what are their pain points, what existing solutions have they already used, stuff like that. But then even just things that seem obvious, like what is the product, like what's in it. And so, what you can answer it like, it's a blood sugar supplement, or it's a guide to annuity investing. Like, okay, great, but that doesn't actually do a whole lot for you when it comes time to write your copy. But if I can actually sit there and write out what the product is, like as if it was going to go in the sales letter, that forced me to like really know what I was selling. So if I answered that question before I actually started the sales letter, I knew what I was selling. Plus, then it turns out that part's already written now. So when I go to write the sales letter, I can just plug it in. But there's a bunch of other questions like that too. What's the background story, the story of discovery? Going back to paradoxical questions, is there an interesting paradoxical question I can ask? I had 12 or 13 questions that I was like, I really need to answer these before I start writing. But then what I realized is when I answer those, when it comes time to do the final step, and so I called that the brief, because it was like a bunch of questions I'd answer to call it the brief. And then copy being the last step, I realized, okay, once I have all these questions answered, I have my research, I've done my mechanism. Now I just need to follow like a really templatized approach to like writing sales letters that follows the same structure that basically all sales letters use. And I can plug in everything from the brief, the mechanism, my research. And if I just sort of go through and check everything off, it's like a paint by numbers sales letter. It really is. And so I kind of had outlines from other people, but I put together mine based on what I'd written for the guys at Lions Publishing that had worked continuously. And there's only like 7 broad kind of parts to it. And then there's like 55 sort of sub bullets. But again, being like paint by numbers, 55 sounds like a lot. But I realized, okay, well, if I just sort of make sure everything's checked off and I go down in order, then I'm going to cover everything that's in a good sales letter. And it almost becomes, at that point, impossible to write a bad sales letter. It may not be the world's greatest sales letter, right, every time, but because you're checking every box by following that outline that I created, I realized I could very consistently write very good copy. And the main outline, the main structure for you guys, it's just like the lead, right, which is your intro, grabbing their attention, hooking them in, promises, calling out the pain point, things like that. Your background story, and the discovery leading up to like a breaking point, realizing that something needed to change, and our spokesperson had to look for like solutions. He tried out of the box things, but they didn't work. Then he stumbles upon the unique mechanism of the problem. We explain that to them. That leads to the unique mechanism of the solution. So now he's like, oh, okay, this is the real solution. But now he can't there's no out of the box solution that kind of encompasses the unique mechanism. He has to create it himself, or he finds somebody who's already created it. There's trial and error involved. That leads to, which is the product build up and reveal is that section. And that leads to like really just the close, which for me is where you introduce the product and then go into telling them to buy it. And you're doing a bunch of stuff on the checklist as you go through it. And then the final part there is just FAQs after the fact, because they increase conversions and sometimes people don't do them and it's shocking. So lead, background story, unique mechanism of the problem, unique mechanism of the solution, product build up and reveal, close, FAQs, and then a bunch of stuff in there. So I realized that was the kind of the process I was taking. And of course I improved upon this process as I was coming up with it. And then I put it to the test. And what I found, and what's amazing, and people find this, we have a lot of people who've done the same thing now for RMBC and have found similar things, is that, research really took me a couple hours. There's something like 22 questions to answer. And it always feels longer when you're doing it, but really like 2 or 3 hours, you answer all those questions. And really I mostly go to forums and Amazon to get my answers, and we can go back into that in a second. But it was like, okay, a couple hours there. Mechanism, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours there, 4 hours. Okay, so maybe it's like 3 hours for research, 4 hours for, the mechanism, so it's 7 hours. The brief, maybe another 3 hours, because I already have answers about my mechanism, my research. So now we're at 10 hours. And then but because the brief has a bunch of chunks of copy already written, now I'm painting by the numbers, and now maybe it takes me 6 to 8 hours to write the sales letter. Maybe call it 7 hours, so that's like 17 hours, and that's total. And then you're done with the sales letter. So suddenly, when I did that, and I kind of like realized it, I'm like, oh my god, you actually can write a sales letter in a day. I mean, it's a long ass day. Like, I don't think most people want to do it, but it's entirely possible. And I've since done this and time myself a ton of times, and I've written sales letters in a day before, and they've done great. But even we have like Ryan Hunter, who's in our Copy Accelerator Mastermind, just used RMBC for the first time, and he timed himself going from start to finish on a first draft. And I think it took him 32 hours, which is not as fast as 17 hours, but still to go for like it's a solid, very solid letter. And, it's like 10,000 words, and he did it in 32 hours. So, obviously you can see the value in that, because if you could write a sales letter a week, I mean, there's 40 hours in a work week. So in less than a standard work week, you can write a full sales letter. If you do 4 of those in a month, you're really cooking. And then the other thing too is like all the research and the mechanism, all that, it actually plays into advertorials and email swipes and email creatives and Facebook ads, and all these other things can all follow RMBC. But when you're not writing a sales letter, it's even faster to do that stuff. So once I kind of cracked that code, the first sales letter I wrote for the guys using that did really well. And then from there, that's when I started pumping out 12 sales letters a month on my best months. And I did that for several months straight, and wasn't entirely suicidal and depressed, because I actually did have free time and spare time, and I would go do stuff. But it was really because of that method. So that was a huge game changer for me. Obviously, that was a huge shift to realize that it was possible.